Nearly 1 month away from the release of Dead Island 2, I was lucky enough to go and get a hands-on experience with what it had to offer, and seeing the weapons, the gore, the gunplay in action, seeing how beautiful the world and the environment was. It was truly exceptional in some areas, but in others, oh man. My friend and I made our way to PAX East, where we were able to go ahead and do so. We made our way to the booth, played some cool carnival games, took some pictures, and when we were all juiced up with goodies, it was time to play. Now I must take a second to go ahead and praise Dambuster Studios for allowing early access to the extent that they did. Rarely do you ever see major companies heading to conventions like this open to the public for them to get their hands on it. They did this a month in advance, so seeing their willingness to showcase their work, that instills confidence, which I vastly appreciate. Now I do have to mention a couple of things. I was contacted, there was a little bit of a miscommunication along the way of recording things, and basically I'm not allowed to show you any new gameplay. I can only show you the provided B-roll footage that I was given. And you're probably thinking, let's not talk about that, okay? So a majority of this video is going to be my face and some gameplay that you probably have already seen. Now my experience was running on PC. I swapped between keyboard and mouse and controller throughout the entirety of my playthrough. One of the first things I did, I put on my YouTuber brain, just started pressing every single button that there was. There's emotes in the game, which is pretty damn cool. In the main menu, there was a stat screen, which, side note, I think more games need something like this because it told me exactly what there is to do in Dead Island 2. I love that. The stat screen told me how many missions there were, how many side quests there were, how many collectibles there are scattered around the world, and I love that shit. I really appreciated all of that. And once I was done deep diving into the menus, I then entered the world of Dead Island 2 as one of the characters, Amy. And Amy, holy shit, I have a headache. After playing this game for like an hour and a half, I think it's time we go and bring back silent protagonists. Normally, I don't mind the characters talking to the player. Most of the time, it's fine and it's okay. But with Amy, she tells you, the player, every single little thing that's happening right in front of her. So like a bridge will collapse and then she's like, oh man, what are we gonna do? Should we go over here and go through that way? Or my favorite, there's this one section where you need to go and open up a door. So you head up to the top room and there's maybe like 20 or so different buttons right in front of you. And then she just starts clicking on the buttons. She clicks on one and she's like, oh, that's not the right button. That's fireworks. How about this one? Oh, that's not it. How about this? What did that do? Why didn't it make that sound? What about this one? Oh, that's fireworks again. Oh, that's the Ferris wheel. Oh, this one's red, this one's green. Let's click that one. Oh, the door's open. Okay, let's go. It's not to the levels of a game like Forspoken, but part of me almost wished that every time Amy talked, my demo just ended right there. Then I got back on my plane home and it crashed into an ocean or something. I was pretty excited to play her. Probably not gonna do that now. And if any of the other characters are like that, where they just talk so much, that dialogue volume is going off. On the other hand though, the game ran flawlessly and I had no issues whatsoever. No bugs, no glitches. The optimization for this game was incredible. They really spent time going in and polishing what we played. I don't know the specs of the PC, but I imagine that they were god tier ones with 4070s inside of it. It could be possible that they spent extra time ensuring that optimization was simply perfect because of the amount of people playing. But man, really, if main release is anything like this, we are in truly good hands. I was very impressed by how it ran and how it looked. As for console, I have no idea. Last gen, could not tell you anything about it. The graphics and the world in Dead Island 2 were mind-blowing. But before we do dive into that, I want to go ahead and get a quick message from our sponsor, Gamers Up. They have some of the best gaming energy drinks available on the market right now. Now for me, I normally don't find energy drinks to be enjoyable because a lot of the flavors that I've had just taste like ass. However, when it comes to Gamers Up, the peach right here is simply phenomenal. The peach, easily my favorite. The blue, I've kind of come around to like after a little bit. But if you go ahead and use the link down below in the description, you can go ahead and get a little discount. So let's get back to it now. The level design, the world design, the environments that I came across, I was in awe. As we know, Dead Island 2, it's not open world. 10 smaller districts tied to one another with fast traveling and loading screens. Them doing these smaller districts really allows them to focus on the level of detail to each one, and that's exactly what I saw. Every obstacle, every room, every interior, every single one that I encountered just felt purposeful. It felt like it was actually pertaining to my gameplay and its experience. I didn't run into many places where it was just empty and lifeless interiors. Everything was pretty packed to the punch. Every single environment that I found myself and my character moving through, it felt like it served a purpose. Everything just made sense and it clicked. And if they go and do this for the other 9 districts that are there, I'm very happy that they went for it over an open world, because so many times nowadays do you see the same flaws over and over when you have these massive maps where there's not much to do in it. But overall, I did like the more linear story path. You did have opportunities to go and explore that I greatly appreciated. For environmental hazards, it was not anything special. Maybe you'll see little red barrels spread across the map, maybe a power line got cut and now it's dangling to a little electrified area. The hazards were very, very basic here. When it comes to the gameplay, this is where things were a little unexpected for me, okay? Imagine if Resident Evil 7 and Sunset Overdrive had a baby. That baby would be something like Dead Island 2. Let me explain. So let's start with Sunset Overdrive. It's a game that's about having fun, killing zombies. It very much identifies as this goofy and entertaining game that's not really trying to push the boundaries much. It's marketed quite similarly to Dead Island, to what they're currently doing. And for the 10 people that played Sunset Overdrive, you're just meant to have a blast. Here are all the weapons, here are all the tools, grab them, go out there and have some fun. Do what you like, there's a story, but the main focus of it is ensuring that the player has a very enjoyable experience. Now imagine if you had that overall vibe for an entire game. Dead Island 2. The weapons, how missions are laid out and told, how characters interact with one another. Its main tone is silly, carefree fun. It's very much inspired by Hollywood B movies like they stated it would be. But then take all of that of what I just said and pair it with the gameplay of Resident Evil 7, or maybe even earlier Resident Evil games. The gameplay is much more slower than I anticipated for a game that's striving to be this over-the-top and goofiness. It's almost like clunky movement and how constraining it is determines how you're going to go and plot attacks. So when you're fighting zombies in groups 3 or less, you can kind of just swing and slash aimlessly. There isn't much planning involved. But when it comes to groups 3 or more, I think you very much need to take a more calculated and strategic approach when engaging in these fights. So if you have 3 zombies in front of you, a boomer, and a crusher on top of that, you need to prioritize who you want to take out first in order to clear the level. And that's something I was really not expecting when I got my hands on the game. The tactical aspect does kind of clash with the tone of the overall game of dumb fun combat, and that was the biggest thing that was unexpected to me, how slow the combat feels, and at times it could be pretty frustrating and feel very sluggish. I know a lot of people in trailers and previews, they see the melee combat swinging, it's a little bit off, like the weighting has like an odd feeling to it. It's exactly like that when you actually have the game in front of you. I was just caught off guard by how much slower it was. It was much slower than I originally intended, which to me, I kind of came around to it and I do like it. Once I got used to this combat style, I was really loving this game. But for all the people that are going in there expecting fast-paced, action-packed combat where you can just aimlessly slash, jump on in, run away, you're gonna be disappointed because it's not really that type of game at all. If you go in knowing that the combat is more at ease here, it's a little bit more realistic and intense, then it's gonna be right up your alley. That's just how I felt during my playthrough of the demo. Maybe it's vastly different once you go ahead and achieve endgame status when you actually have the game. It could be very different there. The slow-paced combat does affect way more than you think. The drop kick, the kick, the sliding, it's so unfulfilling in here. You'll probably do it once, realize it offers no combat advantage, and then never do it again. The sliding, it's abysmal. It looks like a joke, to be honest. Granted, I will say there is a whole skill card upgrade system that you can use to make different character builds, and you can increase the damage on certain things like the kick and sliding. If I remember correctly, there's one card that makes you slide further and have it do more damage, but I did not really dive deep into the card system, we were on a time limit, and instead of sitting there and reading a bunch of cards, I kind of wanted to play the game. In the demo, crafting and putting modifications onto your weapons was not available. They gave us an arsenal of weapons that were already modded. If crafting was in the demo, I couldn't find it anywhere. My understanding, everyone played as Amy, which, dear God, and everyone also had the same loadout. But next, we have melee combat and guns. And oof, starting with the guns, honestly, I overall wasn't too fond of them. Gunplay was a little bit awkward and had a wonky feeling to it. I played on controller, I tried it on keyboard and mouse, my friend tried it entirely on keyboard and mouse, and we all said the same thing. It just feels a little bit odd. The gunplay is serviceable, it gets the job done. I actually went back and played the original Dead Island from 2011, and it felt exactly like that. So the gunplay in Dead Island 2 feels a little dated. The perfect synopsis of it is that it feels like 2011 gunplay in a 2023 game, so it might feel weird at first. The guns weren't good either. The damage numbers that we were getting were pretty underwhelming, but I'm sure that will change once you unlock more and do some basic leveling up. But I found myself repeatedly in situations where guns were just not satisfying to use for me. Maybe it comes down to personal preference, but I'd much rather be using melee combat to fight my enemies, as that's on a whole new level, and I feel like they developed this game with a focus on melee, and then they kind of just added in guns as an afterthought. Like I said, it gets the job done, but I overall wasn't too impressed by it. What I noticed is that a lot of games do it better than Dead Island 2 when it comes to certain systems and mechanics. By the way, the melee combat in here is absolutely awesome, but remember, it's still going to be this slowed down, tactical, realistic playthrough, and once I fully got used to it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The weapon variety is insane. We had a huge arsenal of weapons available for us to use. Long swords, pistols, claws, which were my absolute favorite. They're a blast to use. Sledgehammers, fire axes, and much more. All of these weapons were so rewarding to use against zombies, especially because of that gore system. So in Dead Island 2, you're only going to be fighting zombies. There was not a single human enemy that I fought, which is a breath of fresh air, because too often nowadays do zombie games just focus on including humans when no one gives a shit about them. And fighting zombies in Dead Island 2 is truly spectacular because of that one-of-a-kind system known as the Gore system. Taking a knife or a sword and just slashing away at zombies, watching their bones cripple, watching their skin and flesh being eaten away, watching it melt right in front of you was such a delight. And this is definitely going to be the staple that this game leaves on the zombie horror genre. I made it a point to chop up as many bodies as possible. I would not be surprised if I ended up on a watch list because of how often I was just standing there in front of hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, repeatedly striking a dead body, watching the blood and the flesh and all the legs and body parts being chopped right up, and I had a smile on my face the entire time. I will happily turn myself into the no-fly list if every violent game out there had a gore system like this one. It is ridiculous and so satisfying. I turned to my friend and told him how much I love the Gore system. He was crazy about it too. I wanted every opportunity to ensure I exposed myself to this system as much as I could, and I barely scratched the surface after my game time. The finishers, the little combos that you do, the charge up attacks, they were brutal. I was fascinated by it. I am deeply concerned about Dead Island 2 coverage on YouTube because of how violent and bloody it is. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a purge of videos that get demonetized because of it. The Gore is a rare instance where the developer has been hyping it up for so long to something that they're really proud of, and when you actually go and get the game, it's exactly what they said it was. What you see on gameplay trailers, what you see in previews, it's exactly what it looks like in game when playing, and it's even better. The Gore was built to make melee combat much more satisfying, which in turn is kind of why the gunplay felt a little lacking to me. But to end, what are my final thoughts? Overall, I enjoyed my time with it. I think it's deeply important you know exactly what you're getting into when it releases. Big thing, don't pre-order games. Just don't do that in general. Stop pre-ordering games. The big deciding factor that I want everybody to know is the combat. The slow and more tactical feel is not going to align with everyone, and it's okay. I like that system. It's not what I expected originally, but after exposing myself to it for a couple of hours, I do dig it. I do very much see this game being like the perfect 6, maybe 7 out of 10 game. It's above average. It's not dog shit, and it's not a masterpiece. My friend who played it, he's not really a big zombie guy. He's not the target audience for this, but he said that it's a game that's perfect for buying on sale. For me, on the other hand, big major zombie fan. I also love co-op, so I'll be getting it. But Dead Island 2 feels very much like the game that you'll play the story, you'll finish the side quests, and you'll probably won't touch it again until the new expansions come out. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. Once again, thank you so much to Gamers Up for sponsoring this video. Guys, getting sponsors on the channel, it allows me to go around, do all this traveling, and being able to play games early, and come back to you and talk about them. So any little bit can help. If you can't, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and thank you all so much for the continued support. With that said, I'll see you later. Bye bye.